Hi, I'm Roy from Roy's Garage. Today I'm going to be working on a 2002 Toyota Highlander 2.4 liter automatic. These are the tools that I'm going to be using to do this job. A pry bar, a flush gun, 3/8 drive ratchet, 1/4 inch extension, another 1/4 inch extension, 12mm socket, 10mm and a 5/16mm socket, 1/4 inch ratchet, small screwdriver. This is a flat tip screwdriver, side cutters, needle nose pliers, standard plier, dielectric grease, silicone spray, anti-seize, and my airlift tool to evacuate the cooling system. These are the parts I'm going to be using to do this job. I got some antifreeze. This is a pre-mixed extended life pink antifreeze. Upper hose with clamps, lower hose with clamps, thermostat seal, radiator cap, and a new radiator. I was doing basic maintenance on this Highlander and I noticed that this radiator has a coolant leak. You see all of this pink right here? All of this, right, all over here, all the way to this end, right there on this corner. That's dried up antifreeze. That's a sign of a coolant leak. So that means to change your radiator before it starts actually leaking and run out of coolant and your engine is going to overheat. Okay, before we start, I'm gonna have to make sure that these fans are working. So what I need to do is start up the engine, turn the AC on, and I want to see these two fans work. If one of them doesn't work, then we're gonna have to replace the fan assembly. Okay, I started up the engine, turned on the AC, check your fans. The fans are working. Okay, first I'm going to be removing the radiator cap. Then now I'm going to drain the coolant. So there's a drain plug, this white plug right here. I'm going to have to turn that counterclockwise and it's going to drain out the antifreeze. Okay, so while the coolant is draining out of the radiator, I'm going to be removing the coolant recovery tank and I'm going to be flushing the tank out later. And it just pulls right out. Okay, I'm going to be disconnecting the overflow tube to the radiator. So I'm going to be removing the upper radiator hose, but first we're going to be removing this plastic strap that straps this O2 sensor wire to the bottom of this top radiator hose. And if it breaks, don't worry about it. You can always put a plastic tie strap around it. Okay, we're going to be removing the upper radiator hose. Sometimes this hose gets stuck, so what you can do is like get a razor blade or a utility knife, kind of slit it. And split it open. So I'm going to be removing the upper part of the lower radiator hose that's attached to the thermostat housing. Okay, I'm going to be removing these two transmission cooler lines. Sometimes you gotta wiggle it, break it loose before you can pull it out. Okay. Sometimes when it's stuck, what you might have to do is open up the hose a little, try to shoot some silicone spray inside, kind of lubricate it a little. It might help it. Okay, now I'm going to be removing these electrical connectors for the fan. Just got to push down on it and pull. Okay. Now we're gonna be removing the upper radiator mounts, this mount and that mount. Okay, so I'm gonna be pulling out the radiator fan assembly and the lower radiator hose all at one time. Okay, so now I removed the radiator, so I'm going to be removing this thermostat housing. So there is two bolts, one here and one on the bottom. So I'm going to be removing this, and I'm going to be removing the thermostat so that I can flush out the engine block. Okay. Pull this thermostat housing off, and I'm going to pry out the thermostat. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put back the rubber seal. Put back the rubber seal for now. And I'm going to put back the thermostat housing. Okay, so now that I got the thermostat housing on, I got some hoses on the side, used hoses. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna connect this hose, and I'm gonna direct the flow of water away from us while I flush out the block. So I'm gonna connect this hose to the top. Okay, I'm going to be using this flush gun to flush out the cooling system. So first, I'm going to be connecting my water hose to the gun, and this side I'm going to be connecting my air hose. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to turn the water on, full blast. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to go stick this flush gun right into the upper hose. Then I'm going to start pumping water through this guy. When the water starts coming out of the bottom hose, then I'll pull this trigger, and you're going to be pumping air and water in this system, so it's going to flush it out. Do it a few times until you see the water come out clear. Oh. Just blast it in air. Get as much water out of the system. Okay, usually when you change the radiator, you should flush out the block. So you don't want that old dirty antifreeze to go into the new radiator. Okay, so I'm gonna be removing the upper and lower hoses. Okay, this is the reservoir that I removed first. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna clean it out. Just clean it out the best you can. Some of these reservoirs are really dirty. You just gotta keep doing it over and over and over until it comes clean. This one is fairly clean, the system. So after I flushed out the cooling system, I'm going to be removing the thermostat housing again, and then I'm going to be installing a new thermostat. Make sure you remove the thermostat seal. Okay, so I'm going to be putting this rubber seal around this thermostat. Before I install it, what I'm going to do is wipe down the excess water around the engine, and I'm going to be putting some anti-seize around the bolts. Okay. Wiping off all this excess water. So I'm going to be putting on some anti-seize on these bolts. Okay. Put the thermostat in. Make sure it's in. Okay, before we put this thermostat housing on, make sure you clean this surface. So in this one is fairly clean, so I just use a razor blade just to scrape off all of this crud, make it flat. Okay, now I'm going to be installing the thermostat housing. We don't need to put any kind of sealant on, but if you want to, you can. It's optional, like silicone. But for me, I don't put nothing on. Okay, this is the old radiator with the fan. What I'm going to do is I'm going to transfer the fan assembly and this transcooler lines to the new radiator. So I'm going to be putting anti-seize on all of these bolts. So the next time you need to take it off, it comes off a lot easier. Okay, so now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna transfer these transcooler hoses to the new radiator. Okay. Okay, I'm gonna be installing a new lower radiator hose on the bottom of the radiator. I'm gonna be shooting a little silicone spray in the hose to make it a little easier, and on the radiator make it a little easier to go on. They're going to tighten it up with this worm clamp. I don't like to reuse that of the original clamp because sometimes the hose will pull out, like there's not enough tension on that clamp. So I like to use this worm clamp. Okay, these are the lower radiator mounts. When you remove the old radiator, sometimes this could get stuck onto the old radiator, or sometimes it could get stuck onto the body, or sometimes it just might fall off. So you got to make sure that you put these mounts onto the frame It's easier to put it on the frame first. And then put the radiator in. Okay, so now I'm going to be installing this whole radiator assembly. And you gotta make sure the radiator lines up with the bottom mounts. It feels like it's in. Okay, it's in. So now we're gonna secure the top of the radiator. Put some anti-seize on the bowl. Tighten it down. Okay, so I'm gonna be installing the trans cooler line. So I'm going to be connecting the lower radiator hose to the outlet. Shoot a little silicone spray, make it a little easier to go on. Don't forget to put the clamp on. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to be installing the upper hose. So I'm going to shoot a little silicone spray in the hose, and some on the radiator and some of the engine side. That way it slides on easier. That's optional. I'm going to tighten it up. You can either use a flat tip screwdriver, or what I'm using is a 5/16 socket. You can do either way. Double check, make sure it's tight. The plastic strap that I was removing broke, so what I'm gonna do is put a regular tie strap on. That's just to secure the O2 sensor wire so it doesn't start flapping around. Okay, so I'm going to be connecting the connectors, electrical connectors to the fan. I'm going to be using some dielectric grease. Just put a little bit of grease in here. Same as the other side. Just put a little dielectric grease right in the socket. That's optional, but I usually do it. Okay, so now I'm going to be installing the coolant recovery tank. It just slides right in. Connect these holes for now. The coolant recovery tank holes for now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a little tie strap over here. The reason why I'm putting a tie strap is because this thing doesn't feel really that tight. You don't want this thing to suck air over here. Now we're going to vacuum out the cooling system. Okay, so first what I'm going to do, this overflow tube, I'm going to pinch it off with a vice grip, because when I vacuum this system I don't want air to go in through this tube. So I'm going to just pinch it off. Okay, now I'm going to put on my airlift tool. Okay. So I'm gonna be connecting my air, and what's gonna happen is gonna start vacuuming out the system, and you're gonna see this radiator hose collapse. Right now we're drawing about around 16 inches of vacuum. Okay, that's about right. So we just shut everything off. So what we're gonna do now, I got this hose in the antifreeze, so what I'm gonna do now is open this valve, and it's gonna vacuum in the coolant. Before it gets too low, make sure you turn it off and stick it into the next bottle, because you don't want to run out of coolant or it's going to suck air. Okay, we should be good. So I'm gonna be topping off the antifreeze. Okay. I'm gonna top off the coolant reservoir. We're going to be putting a new radiator cap on. So I'm going to be running this through the heat cycle and check for leaks. Okay, I started up the vehicle with the AC on. My fans are working. Ran it through the heat cycle. Make sure there's no leaks, especially where you disconnected the connections, like from the upper and lower hose and the thermostat. Everything looks good. Now we got a road test. Okay, I road tested the vehicle. Check the antifreeze level. Everything looks perfect. Another job well done. If you like my video, please subscribe and give me a thumbs up. Aloha.